Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Talk With Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to help make a difference in the world. Today, I have my buddy Ian Gilmour with me from Beulah Digital and the advisory board chair of the AI Forum. Ian and I will talk about his entrepreneur journey, the future of AI, and most importantly, the role of human rights for AI. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Keith. I've been really looking forward to this.
So, it's funny where I said, the prep session that you and I had we record that would be just so interesting. AI itself as a topic is like, it's phenomenal. It's endless, right?
It's insane. But that's why I'm in it. Yeah, it's
right.
After a banking career, this is kind of like the denouement of my career, and I'm having a ball. I love it.
So before we go into the depths of AI and in the topic of the day, which is the role of human rights in AI, we love to talk about your career journey and how you got from where you are to now, focusing in AI and living in the Cayman Islands, right? And all that.
Yeah. It's not too shabby, but it's been a journey. That's a fact. So yeah, and I started. I read economics in the United Kingdom. Started my career in the City of London. Worked for one of the banks that HSBC subsequently bought as an investment bank, and I started in risk management. Also worked in treasury, and I went through the sort of the usual career journey of a Gen X person. And we were just talking about the different generation divides. So I did the whole banking career. I was on the floor when Sterling fell out of the ERM. There's some echoes of that today. I went through a big international phase with Deutsche Bank. I was very, very lucky to join them in 1995. And that was when Deutsche was just going toe-to-toe with Goldman Sachs. That was a very exciting time. I was part of the Bankers Trust acquisition team. Did a large stint with a lot of other banks, worked for HSBC quite a lot. And then I decided to jump into consulting. So I've worked in the Middle East. I moved out of, I'd already moved a lot internationally, but I actually took my family to the Middle East, worked out of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, working for PwC and IBM. And I've then decided in 2018 I needed to make the jump into blockchain and the digital economy full time, because I could see it was sort of getting pretty hot. So I moved to the Cayman Islands, which is one of the sort of premier offshore centers for this kind of technology. And very fortunately, as I evolved while I was offshore, I had the opportunity through a company that I set up 12 months ago called Euler Digital, where we acquired a really exciting asset called AI Forum Limited. And I've been retooling that and relaunching that over the last 6 months. And pretty exciting times. And like I said, AI is just, it's incredible. I'm blessed in that respect. So I'm really enjoying it. And as you say, the Cayman Islands is an incredible place to work. So, the few hours I do get off, I've got a lovely beach on my doorstep. But the ecosystem here is incredible. Absolutely incredible. So yeah, having a really good time.
Talk about that difference going from dealing with Basel 1, 2, 3, 4 to now AI.
Nearly spat the water out there.
That's right.
This thing is, I have an economics background. I'm a banker by training, and I worked in risk management. I did a lot of treasury work as well, so now the balance sheet works. But risk management, when you hit the global financial crisis, I was actually on the floor with Fortis Bank when they basically had to get bailed out by the Belgian Dutch government. And watching a bank, I've been through market shocks, macro shocks like Sterling with the ERM, saw some big stuff with bond market collapses and all sorts of stuff. But watching the finance sector implode, and being inside a bank, I watched a bank literally run out of money. I left it on a Friday, and on a Monday, it had no money. Yeah, that is as big a shock as you will ever get in a banking career. It was literally. I remember leaving Brussels airport, listening to the radio, and I remember people talking about Goldman Sachs like going bust. And I even now cannot, I can remember that walk to the plane vividly. It is still a shock to the system, however many years later, 10, 12 years later, to think about the fact that the banking system nearly collapsed, like globally. and we would have been it would have been dark ages. Money would not have existed. I have no idea what would have happened if all of these banks had gone down. So, yeah, that was real. Yeah, but now I'm in a different place because obviously, fortunately, banks did survive, and I'm in a different environment where we're looking at the future. And we were talking earlier, we're in the very, very early stages of a huge revolution in society. And the more I work in this industry, the less I know. AI it's incredible. It's exciting, but it's also a bit scary. And hopefully on this call today, we can explore some of the reasons why we think it's amazing, but also there needs to be, as you just said earlier, guardrails, right? Because I often call it awesome technology, and I really mean it in that sense, because it can be quite overwhelming if it's just left to run. So yeah, so it's a very very exciting time to be in this space.
So what are some of the exciting developments that you're seeing that like the audience should know about? Outside of Elon Musk's $20,000 robot.
We'll get to that in a minute, right? As we discussed a little bit earlier, I think the thing that's really as I say to most people when I talk about artificial intelligence, neural networks, the maths, the psychology, the philosophy behind artificial intelligence dates back to Turing and before then. So this is actually quite a mature industry, right? The maths, the people that have been writing about this, we are talking about a decades-long investment in thought. We have people like Martin Cypher, who's on our advisory board for AI Forum. I mean, he writes really fluently around, he can switch between particle physics, quantum physics into philosophy, into AI, and it wraps it all up. And the thing is that the reason AI has become something that, almost like non-specialists talk about is because of the collapse in the cost of computation. So the same techniques, I mean, obviously the maths, and the way that you use the maths and the way that, I suppose the way it's deployed is evolving, but it really, a lot of the sort of foundation of the science stretches back decades. But cloud computation, the cost of running these very expensive calculations collapse. And so for the last 5 years, you've really seen an explosion in AI use cases because you can afford to run it. So it's not just about storage, it's also about computation. And, that's one of the things about the cloud revolution is that, the costs of computation have dropped and the sophistication of the chips. These math libraries, now you're getting like dedicated libraries for machine learning, deep learning, using tensor mathematics. It's only in the last 5 years that you could really start to run these calculations in an economic fashion. And that's obviously a sort of kind of a corollary to Moore's law. We're going to start to see this stuff explode. So the last 5 years is just a little glint of what we'll see over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Interesting. And going back to the top that we talked about earlier, though, is for AI to work, you need data, you need analytics, you need people to code it, and you need tech, to your point, right? And one of the things we see in the non-digital world are these biases that exist, and how do we prevent these biases getting into the code? So the example that I constantly talk about is a book called Invisible Women, written by Caroline Perez. And in the book, which by the way, I highly recommend everyone to read it, she talks about the bias in the world that's designed for men and how women are often left out of design, right? So the example she used was snowplowing in a small town in Sweden, where their sequence is to plow the large street and street that cuts out to the major throughways, etc. And then they plow the local streets and the sidewalks, which again, that's the design of most cities, I would imagine. But when you dig a bit deeper, by doing that, it actually creates a bias against women, because guess what? Women are the ones that take kids to school, walk a lot, etc. And when they did that study, what the town did was they flip the way and sequence how they plow. And the result was there were actually lots less injuries, lots less people into the emergency room, and actually solve a real world problem. And how do we then prevent that in the world of AI with all these biases, right? I mean, snow plowing is one example. You look at even crash dummies, where most crash dummies are based on the average male bodies,
Mm.
right? And so in a world of AI, like how do we prevent some of these biases, whether it's racial bias, sex bias, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I've done something to the screen now. Hopefully, you can still see me. I don't know what I've just done there. That's technology for you. I think the answer, simple answer, is get more women, more diversity into the science. Right, that's the answer.
Yeah.
That's how you solve this problem. But we also need to. We discussed guardrails earlier. You need, we need to make sure that our laws are fit for purpose for the societal impact of these new technologies, and make sure that bias. We do have a lot of laws already. So in financial services in particular, discrimination based on where you live or the color of your skin is outlawed, right? And it's making sure that these automated processes respect those existing laws. But this is, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I think the role of bias, the role of the legacy, if you like, way that these technologies have been developed have to be addressed very quickly. Otherwise, those biases are going to get entrenched and they're going to be very difficult to remove.
No, that's right. And then beyond that is also because if you don't aware, you end up being in a bubble and not realize it. Like I'm not sure if you look at like your news apps and stuff, like it's filtered to the way you are. And so for you to get even an opposite view, you can't, right? And it's examples like that that's creating more tension around the world because people are being fed one side of the story.
We already live in an algorithmic led world, and it's only going to get more. There's only going to be more. There's not going to be less algorithms. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I personally believe that because we're addressing these issues now, we're having these conversations. There's a lot of statutory development in the European Union. Biden administration just recently put something out. There's a lot of innovation going on, particularly where I live. So there's people are aware of it. I think policymakers are starting to realise that there's this seismic shift, but the technology is so fast,
Yeah.
and it's really hard. So I think personally, when I look at the European Union AI Act, it's fantastic, but it's very prescriptive. It's not principles based, so therefore they kind of have to get down into the weeds very fast, which slows down a deployment. Then you've got, obviously that's one sort of approach, regulatory approach. Then you've got the other approach, which is more principles based. I don't know which one's the best, but all I know is that doing nothing is not going to be acceptable, because private enterprise, innovation, entrepreneurship is just such powerful forces, and and also crime, right? A lot of bad actors, right? I mean, some of the most sophisticated users of this technology are actually, the criminals, and the kind of bad actors that are just hugely sophisticated. You think of malware in particular. So there's a lot to be done, but I'm optimistic. Yeah, I think the majority of the people that I interact with in the artificial intelligence community are thoughtful, they're very educated, and they're very aware of the burden that they carry. So I'm optimistic, but we can't just assume that everything will be okay.
Yeah. But is your view, because AI, I see AI in two possible paths, right? AI as artificial intelligence, turn on the machine, close your eyes and let it work, or AI as augmented intelligence, where the machine and the human working collaboratively together. And an example I can think of is, for example, credit frauds, right? So I remember during the pandemic where all of a sudden, online shopping went off the charts. And so a lot of these fraud detection tools from a lot of the banks would say, well, there's now more frauds. And so for the banks that operated without humans to intervene, all of a sudden rejected a lot of these credit card processing. People couldn't buy their toilet paper. So But for the banks that where they actually have people involved and really
Yeah.
look at, okay, what's the machine doing, right? That augment intelligence, I think, made a big difference. So talk to me a little bit about, AI in that sense.
No, yeah. I think you nailed it. AI works best when it works with its creators. I think humans. There's obviously, we go all the way back to the spinning jenny and the Industrial Revolution and Luddites and all the rest of it. And every, epoch, everybody worries about everybody being out of a job. What I think this technology does is it opens up new use cases, new opportunities. We are getting more digital as societies, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a role as human beings in that digital society or in that digital innovation. So I think your observation about augmentation is fantastic. It allows us to do more, but still to use these inherently human skills. AI is, there's a really amazing set of thought pieces led by a guy called Max Tegmark, and there are others, but Max is really he's a really good communicator, and he talks about the fact that we will have to accept in 20, 30, 40 years time we're not going to be the most intelligent thing out there. AI is going to evolve past our human capabilities, but it isn't there yet. So I think where you are, and we'll have to address with that. but right now, AI is not. It can't compete with human being. It just can't, right? I mean, we've evolved over however many billions of years, and for all our faults, we've got an incredible set of skills that are still relevant in the digital space. So augmenting human insights, human intuition, contextual decision making. That there isn't a machine out there, even in the horizon, that can replace human human ability to contextualize and make decisions, right? So we have a role, and I think what AI can do, a really good example in healthcare is and education and many other sectors, is to help an expert who's in demand and there's a shortage, doctors, nurses, whatever, help get a bit of their time back through automating tasks such as, x-rays, for example. Interpreting a mammography x-ray takes a lot of skill, but also there's a lot of data in there that can actually be harvested and put into a framework where a clinician or an expert can actually analyze that data quicker using some form of AI to actually highlight key medical facts and identify those patterns. And I think that would then get you something like 10, 20, 30, even 40% more productivity with frontline workers. Perfect example where today we have shortages in many, many sectors. AI can come in and augment those skilled personnel and get more out of people by using technology, and therefore reduce the amount of stress in healthcare, education, etc. So, AI's got a transformational opportunity to help skilled workers. It can also help, people with maybe less skills, obvious places in warehouses and things like that. So the use cases are everywhere, and we can do more with less. Yeah. So for me, augmentation is the key use case.
And how do you see the role of AI with the developed world versus the emerging markets or the developing world?
Very timely. I think with Google, we just put a video out this week talking about Google's just opening up in South Africa with their first cloud real presence in using this big subterranean cable that they've invested billions in. And it's interesting. Really interesting research from Alpha Beta Consulting, who are one of the partners for Google, talking about digital sprinter economies. And what's really interesting to me is that actually when you think about Safaricom back in the 80s and 90s using SMS messaging for banking, they kind of they didn't have banks, so therefore they used the technology to effectively replace the role of a bricks and mortar branch. Incredible. And those technologies have really come on leaps and bounds. If you think about edge and all the rest of it, new technology coming to networks and all the rest of it, I think if you could look at it two ways: either emerging economies are getting further and further behind, or they can quantum leap, and move into these sectors using these new technologies, which are very expensive. But building trenches and putting cables down and building bricks and mortar and all the rest of it, compared to just putting up a cell phone tower that runs 5G. Yeah, there's some opportunities there that with forward-thinking policy and possibly lower capex, these economies could leapfrog. So I think this is all down to the technology guys getting out there and explaining the use cases. We were talking about 5G, even 6G advantages. The telco innovation that's ongoing is incredible. Yeah, and 6G is just like insane. So you've got to say to yourself, well, would I go and put down however many billions of dollars of trenching and this infrastructure, or do I just jump straight into a 6G or 5G paradigm? Yeah, and that could be that. Now there's question marks over whether bandwidth actually creates GDP. That's covered in this report. But I think when the use cases start to come through, AI, financial services, cloud, etc., edge, and then that hits the the normal people in terms of their day-to-day commerce. You've got an opportunity if you're an emerging markets country where you've got a well-educated population, which most Asian and African populations are very well educated, but they haven't got any way to use education. Therefore, there's migration. If they can actually deploy their skills locally and through better connectivity and better tools, then maybe they can evolve. But I think at the moment, if I had to put money on the digital divide getting bigger, I probably would say that the amount of investment that you get in G20 type economies means that they will keep getting more and more sophisticated, and some of the other parts of the world, unfortunately, just will go further and further behind, which is it's a real shame, because at the end of the day, the only tools you need to be successful in the digital economy are electricity, internet, and education.
No, that's right. But going back to what you mentioned earlier about guardrails, right? And the reality is, if you let the community on their own device to create guardrails, that sometimes work, but sometimes it's not as effective as governments and regulators coming in. And the question is, how do you create that fine line balance with regulation, but also how do you regulate when the playbook is changing and things are very different? Like the example of self-driving cars. If there's an accident, who do you blame? The person in the car or the company that wrote the algorithm, right?
Yeah. It's everywhere, isn't it? Copyright. If AI develops a book or creates a piece of art, I mean, I think.
So how do you regulate a world like that? Like how do you write laws around that? So
like you said, there's no quick fix, right? There's a lot to understand and to unpack. And I worked in financial services for a long time, and it blew up, right? And you could argue that was because of relaxation of Glass-Steagall or whatever. But the thing is, I worked in an industry that's been running quite successfully, boom and bust a bit, but like for for millennia, not millennia, but centuries. And now we're looking at technologies 5 years old and growing super fast. Can the regulators keep up? Well, probably not. But what they can do is they can start putting some markers down. And I think the thing that we've identified, and we're actually publishing quite a lot of content around, is human rights. And I think fundamentally you have to, if you can enshrine human rights in this epoch, that's a good place to start, right? You should have but most democracies, most civilized societies have got some form of protection against, incarceration without due process, the right not to be, spied on by a government, etc. So those rights should be extended into this epoch, into AI, and then obviously you need to then refine that. And a lot of, going back to my own banking background, and this is what we're seeing, is that there's risk management frameworks, and those NIST is a really good example in the United States. They've got a really sophisticated set of regulations and tools and what have you. We reference NIST a lot, but there's other risk management frameworks that are coming down the pipe. And I think, if you can get those basic principles enshrined and then start using these risk management frameworks to make sure that models are governed and that there is some sort of understanding of the difference between a high risk and a low risk algorithm, and put the effort into the high risk stuff, then that'll kind of keep us, we'll be able to sleep at night. But it is a huge challenge, because even, saying, well, like, you need to get the policy right, that means people on the policy side have to get educated about the challenge. The industry needs to explain it. That all takes time. So, yeah, we're at this. I think we're in the foothills of understanding what this thing really is and how we're going to work, how we live with it. Yeah.
No, exactly. But I'm gonna take it a step further. So what happens when, I'm not sure you remember that movie with Robin Williams, when it's called Bicentennial Man, where
Yes.
they're given these robots that are very human, right? Like, what's your view on that when we hit that stage?
I don't have a view. I find robotic. Obviously, breaking robotics down. There is this. We had this recent one with was it Blake Lemoine talking about a sentient AI chatbot at Google, which obviously,
That's right.
When you step back, it wasn't sentient. It just felt so. It was so effective. It was a fantastic chatbot, but it wasn't sentient, right? I mean, whatever definition you use. But if a Google engineer can be fooled, then what about 90% of the rest of the population? But I don't believe that robots are going to have any sort of rights until a lot further down the road, where you could, and how do you define sentience and all the rest of it? But I think today it's not a problem. I think there are bigger problems out there for us to address for our own species, let alone this new organism structure is going to be. So it's not something that keeps me awake at night. But I think if you think about, personally, I think about the harmful effects of AI that exist today. That's where we need to get started, right? Because there is a fair bit of harm already in the world, and you've already talked about it. It wasn't a trivial, snow plowing in Sweden, and kids in cars going to school. That's a pretty serious issue, right? You want as few accidents as possible as a society, and that if you just take that particular use case and think about how many other of those exist today, that's where I would be thinking, right, where can we make exist what not little, is quite a lot, but where the AI industry is today, how can we make sure that as it grows and evolves, it's going in the right path? And then the robots, when they come, then there'll be someone smarter than me to work that out.
Yeah, no, but I think this is key, right? It's like, how do we prevent things that are happening in the real world that shouldn't happen to then translate into the world of AI, where we know that's the direction of traffic we're heading towards, right? And so, part of it is also depending on the people that are coding, right? If you have more diversity of people that are coding these algorithms, then that's one way to prevent it. So how do you encourage more and more participation and diversity? Like, what could be done from a society perspective in your view?
Get them young. Yeah. Get them young. So we need to be looking at, maybe kindergarten's a little bit aggressive, but we need to be getting kids, we were talking about the sort of, the Gen Z, Gen A's around the corner. We need to be getting these guys working. Read this week about design thinking being in the curriculum in India for the kids. That's a fantastic skill set to be taught that at an early age. Just incredible. And that's where I think, and making, we live in an age of celebrity, right? Making female participation, non-binary participation, it needs to be much more diverse, because there is a fundamental skill now. And I think if you can get in at the sort of, early enough and get people to understand that this is a viable career. And it's not, the other thing, AI is not just about coding, right? Use case development, user experience, even colors, and there's the whole spectrum of activities. I think everybody should understand that it's not just about like command line activity. There's a lot goes on to make artificial intelligence actually in production, and everybody should understand that this is one of those future careers. My kids are always saying to me, like, what, because I was a banker, and back then banking was cool and well paid and all the rest of it. And I said, don't get into banking. That's like, that's a dinosaur industry, right? The industry of the future. They're right there, and they're the digital industries, and you need to start thinking about that. I think AI is an excellent career path, and you can get into it pretty young. We have a youth and student arm called AI Gen. I've got people doing machine learning projects in Python at age 12, 13, 14, and
wow.
they don't, yeah. But, Python's a pretty powerful programming language. They can write 5-6 lines of code off of GitHub binary, and boom, they're doing something to impress, and they just do it for fun, right? They're not doing it to make money. So, but it needs to be broader. It can't just be the STEM kids. It's got to be like the psychology, the creatives, that people who write poetry, people who are philosophers, right? Everybody needs to have a voice in this new industry. So do it young, and absolute. I've got to say, I'm a big fan of the way that the Indian education system's really helping to develop a much broader middle class through building this massive army of knowledge workers, and it should continue, right? Because that's the way for going back to the emerging markets conversation. That's the way to broaden your middle class. That's the way to enrich your citizens, is through education and giving them the skills to be economically active in this new economy.
Yeah, and touching on that, with whether it's India, whether it's US or China, in your view, which country is most advanced when it comes to AI now, and then fast forward, who's best placed to really dominate in the world of AI?
Well, if they were a country, it'd be California by a mile. Nothing comes close. But the level of innovation in Israel is just staggering. I don't know. There's just something about the Israeli mindset and the way that they educate their civilians. Is just like they stand toe to toe with anybody, right? But I think the United States, it's impossible to compete with the United States right now. Literally the centers of excellence. It's not just like Stanford. You've got Georgia Tech. The list goes on and on and on. East Coast, West Coast. Even the middle. There's some incredible. I was writing about an AI company in Minnesota last week. So the US is number one by miles, but I think India is a really exciting place as well. I think parts of Europe, the Netherlands has got a massive community of data scientists, incredible. Hopefully in the next sort of period of time, we'll see some emerging. Singapore's amazing, obviously. Singapore's just incredible at everything they put their mind to. But it'd be nice to see other parts of Asia, places like Vietnam coming along, Philippines. They've got a really growing services sector there, and then places in Africa. It looks like South Africa is going to really take off with these investments from Google. Literally anywhere that the digital economy is being taught at an early age, I think those will really come on. But I still think in 10 years' time we'll still be talking about America. There's just so much innovation in that economy. It's really hard to see anybody out competing, and that's got a lot to do as well just with the entrepreneurial mindset, because it's not just about being able to code, it's being able to visualize, make mistakes, and innovate, and that's not something you can really teach overnight. There's just something about the DNA in California that it's really, really hard to compete with.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense, which is the answer I was hoping you would give, because I live in the US. But so tell us a bit more about the AI Forum, and what are you guys out there looking to accomplish?
Yeah, thanks. No, I appreciate I'll be able to plug my own company. So we bought AI Forum. My headquarters is based in the Cayman Islands, and that's called Euler Digital. And we have a portfolio of AI strategies and investments. And we were very lucky to acquire AI Forum closed that transaction in February. And the last 6 months, we've been reworking the business model. Its DNA is in research, so it does a lot of research. We worked with a really fantastic company called Quantexa, who do contextual AI, did some really cool stuff with them. Just finished a webinar with them with Visa and Morgan Stanley. That was really successful. And then we've worked with EY in New York, Dan Diazio's team, and developed a enterprise AI survey for them. And we're just we're literally just launching our survey in the first part of our demand side survey for healthcare, and literally just about to launch the first conversation about education. So we're working in enterprise AI research in enterprise, healthcare, education, and financial services. That's our sort of bread and butter. But we're also building communities. We're building a marketplace next year. And we're just building a whole ecosystem around artificial intelligence based on our research and our network. But I'm also spinning up through that. We're spinning up some incubators, the whole lot. And it's all AI. Yeah, it's just, the thing is about AI is, I'll tell you what, it's a target-rich environment. I mean, it is literally, if you've got the right people and you've got the right financing and you've got a good business model, you should be able to make money, right? Because there's a lot of white space out there. And right now, obviously the economy is tight, funding's really I wrote in the article, in our research last week, you're seeing a lot of convertible debt used to finance the Series C, Series D plays. Pre-seed's kind of ticking over, because that's always a friends and family round anyway. But I expect once the Fed's got through this tightening cycle, there's 17 trillion of dry powder sitting in the United States alone. It's all looking for a home. It's all looking for a return. And the AI sector, the next wave of investment in AI, is going to dwarf what's just been invested. So I'm just saying to everybody, get in there, start innovating, start doing your business plan, because 6 months from now, I think this thing's going to absolutely take off. So, that's why we're sort of really focused on all the different AI use cases that we feel confident we've got skills in. An AI forum then provides a research platform. We do a lot of news, we do a lot of content, video content, and helping the industry to just sort of find its legs, find the audience, and connect buyers and sellers. So that's kind of our remit.
Got it. And being this is an entrepreneur-focused channel, tell us your journey so far, the ups and downs and the.
This would be a long therapy session for me. I can talk about the downs fluently, but you might end up with a sobbing mess. And I always say, and I went to this lovely forum. It was fantastic. It was called Women in Blockchain. I can't remember the Lavinia, I think, was the lady who pulled it together. Anyway, I went there and met some fantastic people. It wasn't just women in the room. There was predominantly women, but there was a few of us guys as well. And what was really interesting talking about that, because it was a really thoughtful, quite realistic conversation about the challenges that women face in getting money to build their businesses, right? Because there is, no matter what we say, women find it harder to raise money than men. That's a fact, right?
Yeah.
But what I said to them was, look, there's not just the fact that it's harder for you guys. There are two types of people out there. There are people who are employees, and there are people who are entrepreneurs. And you, believe it or not, you will fit in one or other bucket. And I explained to them with my story where I'd sell a house to fund a business that I lost. And, entrepreneurs, it is hideous. It is the most stressful thing you can do to you and your family. It's a young person's game. You need to learn to embrace and lean into failure. Just make sure it doesn't take you down and you can move into the next one. And I've got so many losses, and when something goes well, you don't even get to enjoy it, because you're just like, oh, the relief. It's not even, you can't enjoy it, right? So the entrepreneurial journey is a masochistic one. It's a bit of a calling. I think the reason that people enjoy having a job, getting paid every month, and being able to take 4 or 6 weeks of holiday a year, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because that's a good life. If you've gone to university, you've got a good job, mortgage is paid, you get your 2-4 weeks on the beach, 2 weeks skiing, you got a nice car on the drive. I think you've kind of made it, right? Entrepreneurs, I mean, literally, you go to bed at night, and by the time you wake up in the morning, your subconscious has already stressed you out for the next day.
That's right.
And
That's
and
right.
when it's good, it's amazing. But good is fleeting, because every win then is followed by the whole raft of next challenges, and it never stops. But I think, to be an entrepreneur today is the most exciting thing you can do. But you've got to mentally prepare yourself, because you're geared for failure. I mean, most startups fail. Therefore, by definition, most entrepreneurs fail. Yeah. So you have to understand that the odds are severely stacked against you, and build that in, right? I love the Google mantra: fail fast, fail cheap. And that's what I tell everybody, like, don't hold on. I learned the hard way that holding on for too long is a mistake. You've got to let it go. And if something's not working, kill it, just move on. And that's a hard thing to do.
No, most definitely, it's hard. We touched on it last week with Chris Wright about mental health, right, and going through that journey, because it's not an easy journey.
No, I'm a people pleaser. I'm a sales guy. I like to build these connections. I like to get people, and you try and build those relationships. But at the end of the day, right, as an entrepreneur, right, you got to be honest, and you've got to be realistic. And I think if when I let people go, I tell them the truth. I say, this is why. Thank you very much, right? And this is the other reason that with entrepreneurs, people think entrepreneurs are assholes, and quite often we are. But quite often it's because you have to build a little bit of distance, because my favorite film, and I watch it all the time, is Moneyball with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. Because when Brad Pitt gets Jonah Hill to sack the guy, right, he says, how do I do it? He says, tell him this is your money and this is your next job. And that's it. And I love that, because that professionalism in baseball, right, with the players like moving around and being bought and sold, it's in their DNA. So Jonah Hill did it. He was terrified, and it was easy, because the guy picked up his bag, huffed, and walked off. And you think, crikey. But in most businesses, it's not like that. It's, they've got a mortgage, or they've got, they've just had a kid, or it's their first job, or, and laying people off, it is part and parcel of being an entrepreneur, right? Because if it's going horribly wrong, you're either going to close the business down or protect it. Therefore, that's not a skill set that they teach you in many jobs, right? It's like you learn that on the job. Sacking people, I don't think there's many MBAs out there teach you how to sack people. They teach you how to get people excited about the business, not about getting rid of them. And it's not, and that bit, that is hideous. That's absolutely the worst.
And what's sad is the reality is, and I say this all the time, is you don't decide when you hire, you decide when you fire. Because when you hire, you're talking to people at their best self that they're trying to present to you. And if you're lucky, you talk to them for a few hours. You can't really tell how good someone is or who their true self is within a few hours conversation, right?
Yeah.
So only after they come in, that's when you get to know them. And so that's when you have to decide.
Yeah.
And you just gotta, find where you need to. But that's not an easy skill set to have, but it's so an important skill set to have.
I like that, by the way. I'm going to steal that. But it's so true. It's so true. And the thing is, you never want to let anybody down. Everybody goes into this with the best of intentions, but markets are cruel, right? No. I mean, I love sales, right? And sales is the most measured part of any business, because a sales guy only exists to sell. Right? It is literally the metric for a salesperson is so pure. And when people say, oh, you sales guys get paid so much money. Yeah, because guess what? I only have one metric that I need to meet. There are others, but let's be honest. If you've got a great salesman who's not selling, he's not a salesman. Right?
Yeah.
Being nice to everybody and saying, oh, that was so close, nearly, be better on the next one. There's only so many times a sales guy can get away with that. So the sales guys are the guys that are it's an absolutely pure part of the business, because it's so measurable, right? So when you've got a sales member of the team and they're not performing, they know they're going to get sacked. Whereas other people, if they're not performing, it's a bit fuzzy. How do you define performance? How do you define value add to the business, and da-da-da? But then kind of across all of that, if the numbers are bad, Yeah, and you can't pay the salary, and you've got to triage the business. Then you've got to let people go, and yeah, it's pretty crushing. I mean, that is soul destroying. That's the
Yeah.
bit that is just, and people talk about startups, entrepreneurs. It all sounds very exciting, but the other side to it is hideous, and that's the bit I think that a little bit of you dies every time it happens, and I've been through those conversations way too many times in my life, and that's when you're trying to teach entrepreneurs, when you're talking about mentoring and incubators and all this amazing, you need to always say to guys, get ready for failure, because it's no good going into this thinking it's going to work. It's probably not going to work. Get ready for it.
That's right. So what we typically do at the end is it's really now you sharing the audience of, one, how could they find you, but two, how can they help?
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk on this. So we're based in the Cayman Islands. Euler Digital is the company. The main brand that we take to market is AI Forum, which is ai-forum.com. And the best thing I can ask for anybody is to just subscribe to our channel. Yeah, come on, enjoy we've got a lot of content going out there. We are looking for partners all the time. I'm really interested in people with obviously technologies and ideas and financing, etc. Anybody who's in the AI ecosystem would love to meet you. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do and what the industry does, come to our conference. We're launching literally on Monday. Our microsite will launch for the conference. It's the 28th of November, and virtual tickets are free, people. So no excuse. You can pop in and out as much as you like. We want it to be the biggest, the most sort of exciting conference out there virtually. So we've got a fantastic. We're using passwordless technology. So we're issuing tokens. It's very innovative. It's very digital. We've got cameras. We've got a great technology back end. There's lots of news coming out, and we're talking about all the hot button topics that we covered today and more on the conference. So you can dip in and out. But yeah, the biggest ask would be come along to our conference on the 28th of November. And there'll be the opportunity to ask questions. We've got amazing speakers. We've got the Minister for Innovation for the Cayman Islands talking, making some big announcements. We've got Aditi Joshi from Google's talking. She's got an incredible panel that's going to be revealed shortly. We've got Utpal Mangla from IBM talking about 5G and disruption to technologies. Dr. Terry Horton talking about the future workforce, talking about the metaverse. We've got our healthcare experts. We've got Professor Matthew Crowson from Harvard Medical School, Jude Francis from Johnson & Johnson, and our very own Matt Jones from AI Forum on the panel. I'm probably going to get killed because I've forgotten somebody. I know there's other people out there I should have checked, but it's an amazing smorgasbord of talent. It's all rammed into one day. There'll be some really cool announcements, and we will be deep diving human rights and AI. So the number one ask was just on Monday, click on that website, subscribe for that virtual ticket, and come and join us on the 28th of November.
So everybody, you hear it, 20th of November. Please subscribe. 28th.
28th of November. Yeah. Fortunately, it's the weekend after Thanksgiving. So apologies to everybody if you're still digesting your turkey.
Yeah, but that's fine. I will be on, and please be on the lookout for the AI Forum. I think it's an amazing thing that you and your team are doing. It's quite insightful, right? It's a new world we're heading towards. But if you're in the space or just in general, this is something that's, I think, is critical to have insight on. So thank you so much, Ian, for being on today. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Keith, and really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Thank you. And then for the audience, for those that are still on, again, thank you for your continued support. It's been tremendous, a lot of great feedback I've been getting from people over the last several weeks, and it's amazing. I was at an industry conference, and literally, I had the podcast in the morning, and then I went to the conference in the afternoon, and I see people in the conference watching the podcast.
That's
which was
cool.
because I broadcast live, right? You can watch the playback. So it's amazing to see a lot of people finding this helpful and interacting as well. So as always, thank you for your continued support.
Yeah.
Now,
Andrew
yes,
Ross
go on,
Sorkin,
Ian.
watch out. You're coming.
Now, for next week, I will have my buddy Ethan Powell on. Ethan is the founder of Impact Shares. So Ethan and I will talk about social impact investing and the trends and what that means going forward. So be on the lookout for next week. And thank you and God bless.
Thank you.